Hey, so welcome to this new interview conversation. I'm Steve Larosiliere, and I'm the president and founder of STOKED. We're a nonprofit youth development program. We work to empower low-income youth, New York, LA, Chicago, using the lifestyle and culture of action sports. And today I have Guy Harkless, who's the Senior Vice President and General Manager of Champ Sports in Eastbay. And just to give some context as to why we're having this conversation. So at Stoked, we work with high school students to better prepare them for the future. And when I was talking to Mark Sperling about what would be an impactful conversation, one of the things that in the wake of sort of, George Floyd and racial inequality and that being brought to the forefront, I personally have been having more conversations about what does diversity and equity in the pipeline for the future look like for young people of color. And so when he had mentioned Guy and the Foot Locker Inc., your parent company, is it could be an interesting conversation. So that's what this sort of the context of this conversation is. It's just what does the future of corporate America, work, lifestyle, culture, sports, how does that all fit in? And I think this is going to be a great conversation. So welcome, Guy. How you doing?
Thanks. Very good. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to get a chance to speak to you. It's certainly a good topic for us to engage on. One that, from a Foot Locker Inc. perspective, we're super passionate about and interested to discuss some of the efforts that we're doing at present with some of our social action plan work.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll talk about that. So as the vice president and general manager, what's your main responsibility?
Yeah, so main responsibility is we've got a portfolio of different businesses across the globe, which many people are familiar with. So we have Foot Locker Inc., which is an umbrella organization, which has the Foot Locker brand. It also has the Champs and Eastbay brands, which are the two businesses that I essentially run. But those two businesses are being combined in a way that we're utilizing them in a fashion to get after the high school teen athlete. So my job is to manage the business, the retail and e-com and stores component of the business, as well as all the functions that are connected to that business. So we've got 550 some odd stores across North America that are part of the Champs and Eastbay businesses. So super excited about getting after that opportunity. But yeah, my job is, some days you kind of wonder what you're doing, but most days it's certainly super exciting because the world of retail these days is undergoing a tremendous amount of change. I think the conversation we're going to have today is part and parcel of some of that change that we're looking at putting in play into the marketplace, and how we can affect not only those customers that come into our stores, but obviously also those that we do employ as part of the overall Foot Inc. Associate base, as well as those that may be thinking about Foot Locker as a potential future opportunity.
And whenever I get the chance to speak to a Black man in a very senior position at a corporate at a corporation, I'm very curious. How did you get your start in your career? So it's how did what do you think are the few key things, moves, opportunities that you've gotten in your career that ended you up in such a sort of a pivotal role at this company at this time in our history?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, and certainly being in the industry for the number of years I've been in the industry, certainly I don't, in my journey, haven't seen a lot of folks like me in some of the higher level roles within this industry. But my path was maybe a little different than others in that I got into the industry as an entrepreneur, as a founder of a brand called M1 Basketball back in the early '90s. So my path was through a startup organization, which essentially we ran for about 12 years until we eventually sold that business in the year 2005. But I wanted to stay in the industry and found the industry to be a very compelling place. Had the opportunity to work with a couple of other brands. So I worked with the Puma organization, both in the U.S. and in Europe, and then also had an opportunity to work with the Nike business out of their head office in Beaverton, Oregon. So my path was kind of getting into the industry as someone that had a passion for a certain portion of the business, passion through the sport of basketball. Certainly didn't know where it would take me, but ultimately ended up taking me around the globe and to many markets, and had the opportunity to not only work in the European market as a general manager, but also to work in Asia Pacific early on when that part of the world was really opening up to sporting goods in the marketplace they were in. And obviously now I'm working in North America, and after having a chance to spend some time in Canada as well as the United States. So I think everyone's path and journey into the industry is a different one. For me, certainly it may have been one which is fairly unique, but there are others that take different paths, whether they come into the industry from a design angle because they are a designer with a certain creative talent, or whether they're someone that wants to get into the retail arm that we're involved in and enter through one of the Foot Locker stores that we have around the globe to kind of get a taste for the industry and take that forward as an opportunity. So again, many paths to enter. Sometimes people don't necessarily think of the industry in ways in terms of all the other things that are connected to it. Certainly, there's a large amount of marketing effort that's part of what we do in this industry, which I think is super compelling. We certainly have lawyers and accountants and various functions that are engaged in this part of what we do. So it'll be interesting to have this conversation, because I don't think that people always think about the many ways in which they can get engaged in our world, and certainly looking forward to taking the conversation forward.
That's really interesting, and especially around sort of being a Black man working in corporate America around the globe. And so the next question that I think about is like, what do you think, the sort of competitive advantage that your employers or even your current employers have with you, and in terms of diverse perspectives and sort of unique insights, and especially if you compound that with like startup experience. So like, it's not like you were sort of raised in this global corporate path. Like, you started literally from the beginnings of a company, and then you've taken that with all of your experience and being from DC. Like, what do you think that played into your role as an executive?
Yeah, I think I come to it. Obviously, the DC angle is certainly one which certainly a very diverse city that I grew up in. I had the opportunity to go to Howard University, which is an HBCU, one of the highly regarded HBCUs in the United States. But certainly, the diversity quotient, and one of the competitive advantages that I would say from a Foot Locker Inc. perspective, my current employer, is that we've got stores that are in neighborhoods across the entire, many areas, but certainly from a U.S. perspective, in quite a few neighborhoods that are very diverse in their own right. So we do employ quite a few diverse individuals of all kinds of backgrounds into Foot Locker Inc. Those individuals that are part of that diverse talent base that we have within Foot Locker Inc. have a opportunity to certainly provide us with insights. Some of the initiative that we'll talk about right now engaged a lot of the people that work across many spectrums from a Foot Locker standpoint, whether they're people that work at the corporate level in many different areas, or whether they're people that work out in some of our stores teams operationally. One of the things that we wanted to do was engage a broad set of individuals to help us think and make sure that the things that we're doing are very purposeful, are thought through from a holistic perspective. So tapping into that knowledge base and really making sure that we are understanding what some of the concerns are that are out there, and really onboarding that thinking to make sure that any initiative that we do specifically related to some of the things that are going on now from a racial justice perspective takes into consideration those that are certainly most affected. Our leadership team, I think, did that extremely well. Making sure that we were listening, making sure that we were engaged, and making sure as we built our plan, that plan was an inclusive plan and really was one that was driven by the insights of the people that certainly are most affected.
That's great. Yeah, I want to talk about the social action plan, because when we had our pre-call, you had talked about how you helped drive this sort of Foot Locker Inc. from being a regular company to a purpose-driven company. Like, can you talk a little bit about just the impetus and the sort of desire of that, and then what the social, because the social action plan isn't something that came after the death of George Floyd. This is like you've been working on it, right? So could you just talk about like what was the shift internally that caused you to create it, even in advance of all of the things that are popping up in the world?
Yeah, I think in the world of business in corporate America, and certainly across the globe, there's been a big push for companies to get more purposeful and really rally around what their mission statements are, beyond just a profit motive, but something that actually is more impactful and connected to the customers that they serve, or the individuals that are part of the overall organization. So, before I got into the current role of working operationally on the Champs and Eastbay businesses, I had a couple-year opportunity to work as the head of strategy for Foot Locker Inc. out of New York. And one of the initiatives I had the chance to be a part of was changing our mission statement to become more purpose-driven, with the goal of really trying to establish a stronger emotional engagement or emotional connection with our customer, and really something that kind of drove us beyond just, hey, look, how many shoes do we sell, and how many markets are we in, but how many people do we really affect? So that process, which began several years ago when we did change our mission statement, was part and parcel of kind of an ongoing initiative that we wanted to do to just change the overall trajectory of the company. Prior to my time coming into Foot Locker Inc., certainly the organization had been engaged for quite a few years with charity work and using some of our
foundation, right?
Yep, through the Foot Locker Foundation, and using quite a few of our resources in a number of ways, mostly through scholarship-driven educational initiatives, partnering up with our own internal program, the Foot Locker Scholar Athlete Scholarship Program, but also partnering up with individual organizations like United Negro College Fund, which we all know has been around for quite a number of years and done a tremendous amount of good work. So as we kind of take stock of some of those past efforts that have been built around education and some of the purpose-driven work that we've done, over the last several years, certainly the pressing problem of what had been happening recently in the community, which is not just something that's just happened this year with the George Floyd unfortunate situation in terms of the inhumane treatment that he went through, but also the others that were part and parcel of that. So we felt that this was an opportunity for us to really use our platform as a business to get more purposeful, to take our purpose-driven intent to another level, and to use it in a way that was much more action-oriented to take our efforts forward faster, in a way that could do things in a more organized and directed fashion to help change some of the things that are going on that we can control.
And what has been the result? So you've made like a financial commitment, right? And then like, what could you just explain, like what that is, and then like how does it splinter off, and like what actions are you guys taking right now?
Yeah, so I guess the first thing that we did was yes, the financial component is certainly part and parcel of it, but what I would say is most important is figuring out what were the things that we were going to do, right? There were a lot of ideas from the many people that we had a chance to connect with. Like I mentioned, we have various groups, whether it's the individuals that are out in our stores teams, whether it's our corporate team, whether it's our ERG groups, and that we have some diversity groups, particularly our Black ERG group, which is called Build, which is a group which is really well connected across our organization. Just take stock of all the things that are out there. So as we kind of pulsed our team, there were two things that really came out as really important, right? Number one is, how can we affect educational initiatives that we've already been doing? Certainly we know that the education gap in the Black community is one which is significant, and one which we think we can make a difference in, at least with what we can offer. And then the other big thing certainly is there's a big economic gap too, in terms of a wealth gap that is prevalent and has continued to be prevalent in the Black community for certainly. It's been there longer than I've been alive, and certainly you read the studies, there hasn't been any change in the wealth gap since the mid 1960s. So we wanted to make sure that we took on board economic development as the other component to that. So the two elements that I've talked about, education and economic development, are part and parcel of the whole that we're trying to build around our social action plan. And part of the economic development piece is it's not about writing a check. It's about how we can think about using our platform in a way that's more purposeful. How can we essentially use our business in all the things that we do as a business to be more purposeful and considered in terms of the things that we do, making sure that we're contracting and working with Black-owned businesses. Look, we sell a lot of product from a lot of different brands out there. How can we use some of the things that are part of that effort to use our resources to buy from Black brands, make sure that we're kind of using that effort to develop Black brands and other businesses in a way that can enable them to go a bit further and be a part of our system as we continue to develop our business and move forward. So I want to talk to you a little bit more about all the things, but certainly that is one thing that is critical for us in a large part of what we're getting after. The other big thing that I would say on the economic development front is our organization over the last several years has invested. Some companies invest in mergers and acquisitions. We have done a number of strategic investments. In the course of doing those strategic investments, we've had the opportunity to invest in a number of minority or women-owned businesses. We can continue to use those sorts of efforts to invest in Black brands as well that we think are either interesting to us in some way, shape, or form, or could bring something to our overall knowledge base and some of the businesses that we can click into our system potentially over time that could be very important to our future direction.
It's so interesting because as I mentioned before, during this time, like I've spoken as like a Black leader in an organization that serves Black and brown populations. That's one of the things that I've been talking a lot about. It's like, just don't give money, like invest and like look at people as partners and not sort of like things that you write off on your balance sheet, right? Like, oh, this is what we did. It's also inspired by this sort of work of Dr. Claude Anderson. Do you know about Dr. Claude?
Absolutely.
And the color of law and just being able to combat that. I mean, his thing called the 5 levels, right? The number 1 is economics, right? And so, economics, and then the last one is education. And so I love the fact that you are investing in Black businesses and looking for ways to, sort of balance out that wealth gap. What's been challenging about this so far? Like, what's been this path?
Yeah, so certainly there are a number of challenges, right? So our initiative, just in terms of size and scope, it's a $200 million initiative over 5 years. So it's certainly a very big initiative. But from a challenge perspective, trying to make sure that as we think about how our business operates, and for instance, a large part of what we sell is footwear. Certainly, we are looking to try and make sure that we see what businesses that are out there, if there are Black-owned businesses that are involved in the footwear game. Certainly, we haven't found that there are a lot, but as a result of this conversation, maybe there'll be some that come to the fore that could be opportunities for us.
You may get some pitch decks. Yeah.
For sure. But some of those challenges are just making sure that we think through who's out there, who are the right businesses that we need to think about and get engaged in that can help us move this initiative forward, and who are the right people to make sure that we partner with as an organization. There's all those efforts in terms of making sure that we're extending our arms in a way that is going to be something that will build not just a kind of one-time event, but the goal in this is to really build something that's sustainable, that is something that goes beyond the 5 years to be something that is much more impactful as an ongoing thing. And to the extent that we can connect some of those dots to help the industry in which we're in, and certainly Black individuals and Black-owned businesses, that would be part and parcel of the overall effort.
That's great. 2 more questions. One is, every teenager wants to work in a sneaker store, right? Like, or at least all the kids that we worked with at Stoked, it's like an aspiration, right? And sneaker culture is very tied to, everything. And so talk about just the opportunities that Foot Locker provides and the pipeline from associate to corporate.
Yeah, so I mean, certainly, getting an opportunity to work in one of our stores will give you a very good entry point into the industry to understand a little bit more beyond just the passion for sneakers, but certainly it gives you an opportunity to understand business in a way that would give the tools to an individual that maybe it's your first job and you're kicking the tires and you you kind of come on board and you want to get closer to some of the great product that's out there. But what you learn through that exercise is really, all the things that go into running a retail business like ours. Certainly would also give an individual an opportunity to understand some of the vendors that we work with, whether it's Nike or Adidas or Puma or any of the brands that are out there, and understand a little bit more about how they operate. I think our organization is doing the best we can to make sure that we do establish a pathway as people move through maybe some of those entry-level roles into something that may develop into a corporate level role to become someone that is not selling at store, but maybe buying product from vendors. That is certainly a huge part of what we specifically do. And those roles can be certainly a pathway to other higher level roles within our organization. Certainly someone could become a general manager someday, or at some point maybe become the CEO of Foot Inc. or one of the other businesses that are part of what we offer.
Great. And the last question is, you have smaller brands, people that aren't able to commit $200 million to racial equity and economic development and education in the Black and Brown community. What are the top 3 things that you would advise smaller brands, smaller companies in and out of retail that are watching this, that they could be part of the solution? What are the top 3 things that you think that they could do?
Yeah, I think making sure that as those smaller brands try to figure out how to drive something that would be impactful. So I came from a very small brand. So the M1 business was a very small brand, and one of the things that we did as a small brand is that we put in 5% of our profits we actually delivered to charity. And while we were very small initially, over time as we began to grow, that became a pool of resource that was certainly something that was very that made a difference in the communities in which we operated in. So trying to figure out how to connect your overall operating model in some way, shape, or form to make sure that it's delivering something back of value into the community is very important. So that's one thing. The other major thing that certainly I think is important is hiring practices. So how are you bringing in people of color to be a part of your organization and engaging with them in some way, shape, or form from a hiring perspective, and making sure that the employment base is there. And then the third thing is, as you think through your supplier base and those businesses that you contract with, how can you be very purposeful about making sure that, hey, look, if you're doing a marketing initiative or you're looking for an influencer or you've got some other major campaign going, how can you use your platform in a way to make sure that you're more purposeful and connected to communities of color in some way, shape, or form? So I think those would be the 3 things that would be the top 3 things that would bubble up to me.
Guy, that was awesome. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing lots of game for different, this community, the action sports and culture community. I really appreciate all of your efforts and Foot Locker's leadership and being able to use its corporate muscle and corporate platform to make change. Thank you so much. It was great to talk to you.
I appreciate it, Steve. Thank you very much.